Love, Lost, Rebirth, Alive, Blue Dolphins. The novel, by Makāula Nakae. Chapter 4, Aumākua, Guardian Spirit, Episode 16. Hulas. The three men strolled along the coastal path, the salt from their morning swim drying on their skin. The walk from Queen's Surf toward the Honolulu Zoo was a transition from the quiet of the reef to the burgeoning energy of the afternoon. They were heading to Hula's Bar and Lay Stand, a name that carried the weight of legendary status in the global gay community. Historically, Hula's was the soul of Waikīkī, nestled under a massive, sprawling banyan tree that once served as a natural canopy for generations of revelers. That era had vanished. The great tree was gone, replaced by the polished, sterile glass of high-end boutiques like Tiffany, Chanel, and Gucci. The old charm of the Central Strip had been traded for luxury retail, but the spirit of the bar had simply migrated. The current location sat on the second floor of a hotel directly across from the Honolulu Zoo. As they walked the newly paved path through Kuhio Beach Park, passing under the smaller Chinese banyans and crossing Kalani Avenue, the iconic silhouette of Diamond Head loomed ahead, a jagged green sentinel against the Pacific blue. They climbed the small entrance staircase, where a vibrant mural of a tropical paradise greeted them, a colorful transition from the street to the sanctuary within. Entering the bar, the sensory shift was immediate. The massive windows were thrown open, inviting in the trade winds and offering a panoramic view that combined the lush green of Kapiolani Park with the crashing surf of the breakwater below. "It's jam-packed today," Jim said, his eyes scanning the crowd with infectious excitement. On Sunday afternoons, Hula's was the undisputed center of the local social universe. While tourists certainly found their way there, the tea dance hours were a homecoming for the locals. It was a dense, moving sea of tank tops, board shorts, and laughter, packed so tightly that a simple trip to the bar required a series of polite excuse me's and navigated shoulder nudges. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, the energy would only intensify, blending the local regulars with the curious travelers in a celebration of the island's enduring, open-hearted spirit. They made their way through the sweltering, high-energy crowd to a relatively quiet corner. "I'll treat today. What do you want to drink?" Stephen offered, his voice raised over the thumping bass of the house music. While he fought his way to the bar for a pitcher of beer, Jim and Hanalei leaned against the railing by the open windows, watching the parade of men along Kalani Avenue below. Jim didn't stay still for long. As a local who had spent his life navigating these social waters, he was constantly intercepted by acquaintances. After a quick toast with the fresh pitcher Stephen brought back, Jim gave a playful wink. "I'm going to say hi to some friends," he said, vanishing into the kaleidoscopic crowd with his glass in hand. "Jim seems to know everyone," Stephen remarked, pouring himself a refill. "He grew up here. It's expected," Hanalei replied. Stephen, it turned out, had moved to Hawaii from the mainland 3 years ago, settling in Kenya on the windward side. He spoke of the relaxed and leisurely lifestyle, typical siren song that draws thousands across the Pacific. Yet, as Hanalei knew, that dream often came with a shelf life. Many newcomers struggled with the reality that Hawaii is a predominantly Asian and local-centric culture. This Pacific paradise operates under its own unwritten set of rules established over generations. Those who can't adapt to the subtle social nuances or the slower pace of island time often find themselves isolated, eventually packing their bags for the mainland once the novelty of the beach wears thin. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a white man named Martin, who sidled up to them with a glass in hand. "Are you two dating?" he asked point blank. The unexpected question caught them off guard. "Do we look like a couple to you?" Stephen asked, half amused and half defensive. "Well, you both look good," Martin shrugged. "It's unsurprising if people think you're a couple." Hanalei watched Martin, thinking about how quickly the human brain jumps to conclusions. People often see two men talking and immediately map a romantic narrative onto them, their brains pre-wired to categorize rather than observe. These automatic assumptions take flight, a form of self-prophecy that is hard to rewire once it becomes a habit of the mind. From the outside, it might look like we're a couple, but we're just swim buddies, Stephen explained, trying to diffuse the assumption. Hanalei added, "We swam at Queen's Surf this morning and came here for a quick drink." The explanation seemed to settle Martin, but Hanalei's intuition, honed by years of observing social dynamics, picked up a shift in the air. He instinctively felt that Martin wasn't just curious, he was interested in Stephen. Leaning in, Hanalei whispered, "I think he likes you." Stephen's eyes went wide. "Do you think so?" he asked softly, a mix of surprise and uncertainty on his face. "Definitely," Hanalei nodded, giving him a supportive nudge. Wanting to facilitate the connection, he played the role of the graceful exit. "I'll go say hi to some friends. You two have a good time." He offered a quick smile and stepped away, believing it was better to leave them to their own conversation. In truth, Hanalei didn't have anyone specific to greet. He drifted through the sea of bodies, passing Jim, who was still deep in a boisterous conversation near the entrance, and moved aimlessly toward the other side of the bar. The music was a wall of sound, a distraction from his own thoughts, until the vibration in his pocket broke the spell. It was Manao. "Hey, Manao, what are you up to?" Hanalei shouted over the noise. "It's loud here. Are you at a bar? Are you at Hula's? I'm a mess. I want to die." The voice on the other end wasn't just low, it was broken. Manao was sobbing, the sound jagged and desperate. "I can't take this life anymore. I can't bear this pain. It would be better to die." The festive atmosphere of Hula's vanished instantly. Hanalei's blood ran cold. "Where are you?" "In my car, the zoo parking lot." "Wait there. Do not move. I'm coming to you, okay?" Hanalei bolted. He pushed through the crowd, ignored the mural of paradise by the stairs, and practically ran across the street toward the Honolulu Zoo parking lot. The sun was still bright, a cruel contrast to the darkness in Manao's voice. He scanned the rows of vehicles, his eyes searching for the familiar silhouette of Manao's red car. When he finally spotted it, his heart skipped a beat. Manao was slumped over the steering wheel, motionless, looking as though he had simply fallen asleep or had finally let go of the struggle altogether. "Manao, open the door!" Hanalei shouted, his palms stinging as he hammered against the window. The afternoon heat in the zoo parking lot was stifling, turning the red car into a greenhouse of despair. "I just want to die. My life is horrible." Manao's voice was a slur, barely audible through the glass. Finally, the window buzzed down a fraction. A heavy, cloying scent of high-proof alcohol and the stale tang of sweat wafted out. Manao's eyes were unfocused, glazed over with a chemical film. He looked less like a man in mourning and more like a man whose nervous system was simply short-circuiting. "You didn't drink too much, did you?" Hanalei asked, his voice tight with a mix of fear and irritation. "Who cares? I hate my life, my father, my ex. I hate everyone." Manao collapsed back into the driver's seat, his head lolling to the side. "It's just the alcohol talking," Hanalei said, trying to anchor the situation in reality. "You'll be okay. I just want to be loved. I want love, but I can't have it." Manao began to sob again, the jagged, ugly sound of a bad come-down mixed with intoxication. "My father hates me. My ex dumped me like trash. I can't take this anymore." As Hanalei watched him, the immediate panic of a suicide intervention began to settle into a weary recognition. Manao wasn't reaching for a permanent end. He was drowning in a temporary abyss of substance-induced depression. "Manao, did you take drugs this weekend?" "That's irrelevant." "Manao, you need to stop. The drinking, the drugs, it's what's making you feel this way. That's not the point." Manao's words trailed off into a mumble. Within seconds, the frantic energy that had fueled the phone call evaporated. He curled into a fetal position in the driver's seat, his breathing hitching and then smoothing out into the rhythmic, heavy snore of a blackout. Hanalei stood by the car for a long time, the sunlight reflecting off the red paint. He checked the door, locked. He looked at Manao, slumped and snoring. A mess of unaddressed trauma and poor choices. Realizing there was nothing more he could do without breaking a window or calling the police, which would only make Manao's life harder, he decided to let him sleep it off in the relative safety of the locked car. Meanwhile, back at the second-floor sanctuary of Hula's, the world was still spinning in high gear. Jim, oblivious to the drama in the parking lot, spotted Jeremy and his group near the center of the bar. "Jeremy!" Jim called out, pushing through the crowd. He watched the choreographer, wondering if the Volcano Party show Coco had agreed to was already being plotted out amidst the cocktails and the music. In Hawaii, the term hapa haole traditionally refers to someone of mixed heritage, specifically part white and part Hawaiian, though in the year 2000, it was often used more broadly for any mixture involving white ancestry. Jeremy fit the description perfectly. His Broadway-trained physique was slender and taut, a testament to a life spent under stage lights. As the owner of a Waikīkī dance studio, he was a pillar of the local gay scene, managing the delicate balance between tourist-facing shows and the raw energy of the underground clubs. Jeremy was currently deep in conversation with a tall white man Jim didn't recognize. The choreographer seemed on edge, his usual professional composure fraying into irritation. Jim, ever the social diplomat, moved in with a practiced smile. "You look fabulous as always," he said, pitching his voice to cut through Jeremy's agitation. The flattery worked. Jeremy's gaze traveled from Jim's head to his toes, conducting a cold, professional appraisal that eventually warmed into approval. "You still look great yourself," Jeremy conceded, his eyes lingering on Jim's frame. "Listen," Jeremy continued, his voice dropping into a sharp, businesslike register. "I'm short-staffed at the nightclub. I've seen you move on the floor many times. You're tall, you've got a great body, and frankly, the regulars are starting to bore the audience. I want you to be a stage dancer. I'd love for you to dance at the Volcano Party." The offer was electric. In the year 2000, the Volcano Party was the absolute peak of the circuit scene in the islands. Being asked to dance was more than a job. It was a high-status invitation into the inner sanctum of Waikiki's nightlife. "Are you serious?" Jim asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. When Jeremy gave a decisive nod, Jim didn't hesitate for a second. "Yes!" he exclaimed, leaning in to plant a celebratory kiss on Jeremy's cheek. "Congratulations," said the tall man standing beside Jeremy. He had striking, ice-blue eyes and an undeniable Hollywood-style smile that reached all the way to his gaze. "You're going to be the hot go-go dancer everyone's talking about. You have a fantastic physique. You'll look incredible under the spots." He extended a hand, his grip firm. "I'm Kalani." Jim shook his hand but paused, his brow furrowing as he took in the man's features. "You look white. If you don't mind me asking, how do you have a Hawaiian name?" "I'm not Hawaiian by blood," Kalani explained simply, his smile never wavering. "I was adopted by a Hawaiian family when I was a child. They gave me the name. Having a name that means heaven or the sky is beautiful," Jeremy added, the earlier tension finally leaving his shoulders. "It suits you, and it'll look good on the guest list next to Jim's." As the house music throbbed around them, Jim felt a surge of adrenaline. He was no longer just a spectator in the crowd. He was about to become part of the spectacle itself. Jim reached out, his hand resting lightly against the solid heat of Kalani's chest. He looked up into those ice-blue eyes with the wide, disarming gaze of an innocent child. "It's a beautiful name," Jim murmured. "I love people with Hawaiian names." Kalani didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned into the space between them, offering a meaningful wink that promised more than just casual conversation. "That's good to hear. How about we go on a date and have dinner sometime?" The exchange was swift. Once Jeremy drifted away to manage another part of the bar, Jim and Kalani swapped numbers, carving out a plan for a date in the middle of the coming week. Later, as the Sunday afternoon light began to bruise into a deep violet, Jim drove Hanalei back toward his condo. They watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the Pacific in streaks of fire and gold. "Did you have a good time today?" Jim asked, his voice buoyed by his own success. "It was all right." "Stephen seemed happy to get some attention, and you look quite happy too," Hanalei replied. He hesitated, holding back the chaos of the afternoon for a few moments, but the weight of it was too much to carry alone. "I've got a date on Wednesday night." "How about you?" Jim asked with a triumphant, playful smile. Hanalei finally let the truth spill out. Manao called. "I found him, all messed up in the zoo parking lot." "What? Happened? Say it again?" Jim's face dropped, the gears of his mind stalling as he tried to reconcile the tea dance fun with the sudden darkness of Hanalei's words. "Probably too much drugs or alcohol," Hanalei replied plainly. "So, he was fucked up," Jim concluded. He didn't sound entirely surprised. Whispers about Manao's spirals had reached his ears before. In the tight-knit community of Waikīkī, secrets had a way of drifting like the trade winds. Most likely, yeah. The heavy atmosphere was suddenly punctured by Jim shifting in his seat. "I need to pee," he blurted out. It wasn't a tactical maneuver to avoid the Manao disaster. His face held the genuine, wide-eyed look of someone facing an imminent physical emergency. Needing to pee all of a sudden. "Should we stop somewhere?" Hanalei asked, his mind immediately scanning the route for a gas station or a public restroom. "Can I use your bathroom?" Jim asked, his voice urgent as they pulled up toward the entrance of Hanalei's condo. "We're already here." Jim parked the car in the guest area, and they hurried to the elevator. Once inside the condo, Hanalei unlocked the door and pointed toward the bathroom adjacent to the kitchen. Jim dashed for it while Hanalei slipped off his shoes, flicked on the living room lights, and started a track on his desk to fill the silence. When Jim emerged, he stood frozen, his eyes scanning the apartment. His expression shifted from relief to genuine shock at the stark, clinical whiteness of the space. "What kind of place are you living in? You haven't just moved in, have you?" Jim asked, his voice echoing slightly in the sparse surroundings. "I moved in 2 months ago from Kona on the Big Island," Hanalei said faintly, his voice sounding thin in the empty room. "You're a designer? You should do something about this place," Jim said, walking through the living area as if searching for a single sign of life. "There's nothing here. It looks like a hotel room. No personal touches. If you want, I can help you decorate. You're right, there's nothing here," Hanalei replied. "But thanks for the offer." "Honey, I know you broke up with your boyfriend, but even after 2 months, this isn't normal. There are no colors, no candles, no pictures of naked men. There's no Madonna, no Wizard of Oz, no Liza Minnelli or Barbra Streisand either." Hanalei felt a genuine laugh bubble up at the stereotypical list of essentials. "Want something to drink?" he asked, heading to the kitchen to hide his face. Jim followed and stopped at the small table. His eyes caught a photo of Hanalei with a handsome man, Kevin. Beside the frame sat several white ceramic items. Jim didn't notice that one of them, a plain white urn, was holding more than just decoration. To an outsider, it was just another part of the monochrome aesthetic. "Was he your boyfriend?" "What happened to him?" Jim asked, his fingers lingering on the cool glass of the photo frame. Hanalei handed him a glass of white wine, his movements precise and detached. "He died 2 years ago," he said curtly. Without waiting for the inevitable heavy silence to settle, he turned and walked toward the balcony. Jim was struck dumb. The playful, effervescent energy he usually carried evaporated instantly. He carefully placed the photo back on the table, his eyes darting toward the white urn he hadn't quite recognized as a vessel for ashes. He followed Hanalei outside, the humid night air pressing against them. "I'm sorry," Jim said softly. He set his wine glass on a chair and pulled Hanalei into a gentle, grounding hug. Jim had never lost family. Both his parents and his siblings were still a vibrant part of his life. In the late 80s and 90s, he had watched from the periphery as local men began to disappear, becoming invisible before the rumors of the wasting disease reached his ears. Those silent deaths from AIDS had always felt misty and distant, a subtle, shallow loss that made him sad but had never truly hit him with the force of reality. Until now. How old was he? He was 42, Hanalei said. He rested his arms on the railing, his gaze fixed on the orange glow of the highway lamps snaking through the city like a river of fire. That's too young to die. Jim, nearing 42 himself, felt a cold shiver of mortality. The thought of simply ceasing to exist, of leaving behind nothing but an empty white room and a single photo, scared him. He stayed away from the thought, unwilling to dwell in that darkness. He sensed that asking how Kevin died was a door Hanalei wasn't ready to open. "Do you still love him?" Jim asked, the question slipping out before he could catch it. Hanalei kept his eyes on the dark, hulking silhouette of Diamond Head. He was silent for a long time before responding. "I don't know. What do you mean you don't know?" "Why?" Jim turned to look at him, genuinely puzzled. Hanalei kept staring at the sparkling highway below. "Because he left me all alone," Hanalei said, his voice cracking with a sorrow that was as much about abandonment as it was about loss. Hanalei's words resonated deeply within Jim. Though Jim had never had a long-term relationship, he understood the sudden, crushing weight of loneliness. It was the common language of their community. "Most single gay guys are as lonely as we are," Jim said, his voice gaining a sudden, fierce conviction. "That's why we must help, care for each other, and support each other. That's what having friends means, right?" Hanalei turned to look at Jim and offered a faint, genuine smile. Jim reached out, comparing the size of their hands for a moment before bringing Hanalei's hand to his lips for a soft kiss. "I'm glad I found you on the beach that day." "I'm glad you found me too," Hanalei replied. Jim had been on a long, frustrating search for a swimming companion ever after his best friend, Tom, moved to California. Tom had followed the classic island story, falling in love with a tourist and leaving the Pacific behind. Jim had approached countless men on the sand at Queen's Surf, but the connection never took root. "Were they bad swimmers?" Hanalei asked, curious about the men who hadn't made the cut. "No, their swimming was decent enough," Jim explained, swirling the wine in his glass. "But I just didn't click with any of them. Not like this. There's a rhythm to it, you know? It's not just about the laps." Now, with Steven entering the orbit, Jim felt the stirrings of a real group forming, a small, chosen family anchored by the sea. "So, it really was lucky you found me on the beach that day," Hanalei said, his smile softening the starkness of the balcony. "Yeah, but it only worked because you decided to swim back," Jim countered. "I love swimming in Waikīkī, but it's the fun we have afterward that deepens the friendship. That's the part that matters." Hanalei nodded, realizing how much he had come to rely on Jim's relentless, bright energy to pull him out of the white silence of his apartment. "I've enjoyed spending time with you and the others, too. It's been good for me. I'm just pleased we became such good friends," Jim said warmly. He leaned over and planted a quick, affectionate kiss on Hanalei's cheek, then wrapped a heavy arm around his shoulder. They stood there together, two men silhouetted against the dark sky, sipping their wine and watching the shimmering electric veins of the city lights pulse below them. To be continued. Swim and listen to the historical gay drama in the center of the Pacific. We are releasing a brand new episodes every Sunday midnight until the epic conclusion of the story. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 15 to 45-minute hit of cinematic historical drama set in the tropical islands of Hawaii, the perfect daily plunge into the shattered world a millennium after 9/11. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full novel now. Bookmark Blue Dolphins playlist, A Great RG Saga, Alexine, Volume 1, Talesius playlist, Volume 2, Sacred Band playlist, and Divine Oracle. Unwritten words behind my novel playlist. Subscribe to follow the waves and currents of Forbidden Paradise love tales. Comment below.